this very important next few verses. I will skip the ministry in the synagogue. I want to talk about the ministry in the school of Tyrannus. Let's look at chapter 19. Verses 9 through 10. So follow along in your Bibles. But when some were becoming hardened and disobedient, speaking evil of the way before the people, he withdrew from them and took away the disciples, reasoning daily in the school of Tyrannus. This took place for 2 years, so that all who lived in Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jews and Greeks. These two verses are very critical. We need to explain what's going on here, okay? In your notes, you have an explanation of the school of Tyrannus, okay? What is this school? Well, Bible scholars do not know exactly what it was. Was it a real school that Paul taught in? Was it owned by Tyrannus? Was it a school building that Paul rented? We don't know. But tradition tells us that this school met during the rest hour, the hottest part of the day. It met during that time, and Paul instructed these 12 men, and the result of this instruction is found in verse 9. What does it say? It says that these 12 men went to Asia Minor, the country now that is called Turkey, the place where Paul wanted to go, and God stopped him twice. He said no. Now it begins to make sense why God stopped him. Because if Paul would have tried to evangelize all of Asia by himself, could he have done it? Not in a lifetime. He couldn't have done it in a lifetime. But God stopped him because he knew what was coming. He knew that Paul would teach these 12 men in the school of Tyrannus. Maybe there was more. We don't know. But we know there was at least 12. He instructed them. They took the gospel, and what does it say? All of Asia was evangelized. Does the Bible lie? Does it speak figuratively? No. When it says all, and the literal sense makes good sense, don't spiritualize it. These 12 or maybe 20, we don't know exactly how many, in 2 years' time were able to evangelize all of Asia. Is that amazing or what? There are 17 of us in this room, I think right now. Did I count right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There are 14 of us in this room. Do you think we could evangelize all of Uganda in 24 months? And Uganda is a fraction of the size of Turkey. It wasn't called Turkey then, okay? This is Asia. How did they do it? Well, I think they did exactly what Paul did. They evangelized, they discipled, and they planted churches, and that's how the church grew, and that's how they were able to evangelize a whole continent for God's glory. This is an amazing story. It's not just, School of Tyrannus, and they evangelized all of Asia. Let's go on to the next verse. No. This is an amazing 2 verses. Now, what does it say? We know nothing of Tyrannus, whether he was the owner of the building or a teacher who taught there. If the latter, one wonders if his students saw him as living up to his name, because Tyrannus means the tyrant. Have you ever had teachers like that before, who are tyrants? Okay, the Western text adds to verse 9 that Paul taught there between the 5th and the 10th hour, i.e. between 11 and 4 p.m., 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. This is altogether plausible, since these hours would constitute the heat of the day when most Asians took an extensive siesta. The hall would likely have been vacant at such a time, and Paul would have taken a break from his own trade during this period. Once again, Paul reasons with his students in this school as well, so that all who lived in Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jews and Greeks. That's an amazing statement. That could only have been accomplished by Paul with the help of his disciples or his students, all faithfully following Acts 1:8. Could God accomplish the same thing with the students and graduates of NTCGS? Good question, huh? Okay, so this is one of those amazing, amazing stories in the book of Acts. Let's go next to chapter 9, verses 11 through 12. I wish we had time to go over this, but we're going to have to move along quickly, so I'm not going to talk about Paul's healing ministry or his encounter with magicians. That's a very funny story. You remember reading it? Okay, these guys tried to imitate Paul, and what happened? The demons came after them and chased them. I would love to have seen that. I think that would have been absolutely hilarious to watch. But while it's funny, it is also serious, because you know in this country there are demons, and some of you may have seen the evidence of that in the lives of people. So a lesson for us to learn here. And then we have a progress report in chapter 19, verse 20. Let's just look at that briefly. This is progress report number 6. And you know what? It sounds exactly like the preceding 5. So the word of the Lord was growing mightily and prevailing. Praise the Lord for the way this work and ministry was going. Let's look at 21 and 22. Now, after these things were finished, Paul purposed in the Spirit to go to Jerusalem. Don't you like that phrase? Paul purposed. He had a goal. He was working towards something. He purposed, but he did so in the Spirit, with the Spirit's direction. So he purposed in the Spirit to go to Jerusalem after he had passed through Macedonia and Achaia, saying, "After I've been there, I must also see Rome." And having sent into Macedonia 2 of those who ministered to him, Timothy and Erastus, he himself stayed in Asia for a while. Okay, so Paul had a master plan, a strategic plan. He knew what he was doing. He had a goal. He was pressing towards that mark. In this phrase, one finds the balance of God's direction and man's planning. God's guidance for us comes from principles in His Word, godly people, circumstances, gifts, and desires that come from Him and return the glory to Him. Sadly, many Christians go through life with no ambition, no goal, no strategy, and they excuse their laziness by piously complaining they were waiting for the Spirit's leading. You have that in your notes? Please underline that, okay? Yeah, there are a lot of lazy Christians, and we're surrounded by. Well, I'm not going to do that because the Spirit hasn't led me. What are you waiting for? Is God going to write something in the sky? That's tragic. So, Paul's ultimate goal was to preach the gospel in Rome and Spain, and to fulfill Acts 1:8. This verse marks a major turning point in the book of Acts, as now Paul sets his sights upon Rome. Why go to Jerusalem when it was the opposite direction from Rome? The answer is found in Paul's explanation in Romans 15:25-31, which was written before his visit to Rome. He wanted to take an offering from the Gentile church to those in need in the church in Jerusalem. So that explains why Paul was heading back to Jerusalem. Then in verses 23 through 41, we have a riot over the fact that the silversmiths, and silversmiths were the ones that made idols. Okay? And they were saying, oh, we're losing our business because Paul is telling people to burn their idols, to get rid of their idols and their superstition and all of that, their magic. And so they raise a complaint, and it becomes so strong that a riot occurs. Now you say, well, so what? If they have a riot, they have a riot. Well, you don't understand. This is a city that is ruled by Rome. And if there is a riot, it is in danger of being attacked by Rome. And so they are really concerned. Okay? They are really concerned. So let's read the last part of this. In here, not only is there danger that this trade of ours will fall into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis be regarded as worthless, and that she whom all Asia and the world worship will even be dethroned from her magnificence. Do you know what? If you go to Ephesus today, and tomorrow I'll show you pictures, okay? We were there in November. You can barely find 2 stones put together from the temple of Artemis. Nothing left. This magnificent structure and so forth. So when they heard this and were filled with rage, they began crying out, "Great is Artemis the Ephesians." Okay? The city was filled with confusion, and they rushed at one another with one accord into the theater, dragging along Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions. And when Paul wanted to go into the assembly, the disciples would not let him. They were afraid he would be torn to pieces. So, let's move on here to Paul's strategic plan and his riot at Ephesus. All right, here's the theater, class. Okay, I had the privilege of walking inside this. This was the largest theater in the world. Oh, sorry, thank you. This is the largest theater in the world. It seats 23,000 people. So I asked my guide, okay, obviously Paul wanted to go here so he could address the whole city who had assembled inside this theater. So I asked my guide, I said, how could Paul talk to 23,000 people without a loudspeaker? How could he do that? So he said, I'll show you how. I had a colleague with me. He said, have your colleague stand right here, right on this spot, right in the middle of this area. And you go up, you can't see it. You go up to the highest point in this theater and you whisper something to him. No, I'm sorry. Have your colleague whisper something to you. I just laughed. What are you talking about? There's no way I'm going to hear somebody whisper something from down here all the way at the top of this huge theater. So I went up there somewhat reluctantly, but I went up And I shouted at my friend, because you have to do it when you're up there. I said, whisper something to me. So he did. He said something like this. He was talking like this. And do you know what? I heard every word he said clearly. You see, they had a technology in those days that we still don't know about. The scientists are studying this and trying to figure out how they could design this theater in such a way that someone could whisper and be heard by someone at the top. I've been to 2 theaters like this. The other one just a little bit smaller in Jordan. Same thing. You stand in the middle, the person at the top can hear you speak without a microphone. So we think our technology is advanced, but there are things that we don't know about ancient civilizations this day. The construction of the pyramids is still a mystery. They have not solved how they got all of those stones that were 20 tons each and piled them on each other without bulldozers, without helicopters. They have no idea. Okay?
You can just build in that thing.
Yes.
Because those are stones which are.
I try to modernize this, but is it something that try to modernize in the modern days, or even in the days of Paul?
Oh, in the days of Paul, it was better.
I think it's better. I mean,
Yeah. But even today, you can whisper and the guy can hear up at the top.
What I want to find out, is this still reserved like that? No adjustment?
Oh, no adjustments. No, they're still digging it out. If you look I'll show you another picture tomorrow. You can still see they're still excavating it little by little, okay? Yeah, amazing architecture. But Paul's friends told him, don't you dare go in there. They will tear you apart completely. So he didn't go in. But this is the actual. He was out here on this road waiting to come in here. And they said, don't go in there. So again, the Bible's about real events, real places, real people. Details sometimes we don't understand completely. So Paul, then when he finishes, goes back to Greece briefly. He travels through Macedonia. There's a plot by the Jews. And Paul says, I've got to go by ship. Because if I go by land, they will discover me, they will tear me apart. So he got on a ship and he went back to a city just south of Ephesus. And he went to Troas, and then he gives a message. Okay, look at your notes. We're really skipping on quickly here. In chapter 20 and verse 7, you remember reading this before you came here, I hope. Paul is a long-winded preacher at night. Are you a long-winded preacher? Do you preach sermons that are very long and people fall asleep? Well, it happened to Paul. He was preaching late at night, dimly lit room, some candles undoubtedly, and the candles cause heat. There was a young man sitting in the window, and you know what happened to him. He fell out. And they picked him up for dead. Now, please remember, this document, this description is written by Luke, a medical doctor. If Eutychus was not dead, Luke would not have said he was dead. Okay? So, what happened? Well, he fell out. Let me read the description in my set of notes.